Not that I know much about it all, but thank you, Daniel. We have to have experts with these new fandangled things. Today, flying back from Asia this time, I left my backpack in LAX and with my, my phone. It was good. I didn't have a phone at all for 10 days. It was marvelous. And then it all came back and more. And and I had my little, what is it? iPad, yes, a mini iPad. Very important to me. All my reading material was there. So it all came today, and of course you have to update it because the time was still on Thai time, and so it was 1:14 a.m. I was going, oh really? And I mean it is a trip, this going back and forth. But at the same time, there's something so amazing about coming back and actually meeting some weather. I mean, Thailand, it was like 95, It was like, oh my God, it's hot. It's time to leave. Which I seem to do every year now. This is my 11th year of going back and forth. And I still go. I still went before that, but this has been regular every year. And I'm so happy to see you all. I really, I guess I can still teach. I don't know anymore, I have to tell you, a little bit of, I live right by the river in Bangkok when I'm there. I have an apartment there, and I look out, and there are 5 monasteries directly across from me. I mean, it's like, oh my God. And, but there are 40,000 monasteries in Thailand, temples or monasteries, 40,000 of them. So, it's not a big deal, but it shows you that, and they're, it's a very specific art that they're involved in. It's very precise, and particularly their pagodas and everything they do is pretty remarkable, and I love their food. So we're going to sit. Have you heard of this? It's just it's a little bit about letting go of involvement of any kind, and it's a function of bringing the mind to the body, and even though it is, it's very fickle. It's going to keep running, and you're just going to keep, whether it's the breath or just the body or just simple, don't do anything. It's all okay, The practice is really not based on something. It's based on nothing. And yes, we pretend to have these methods or whatever, but they are really just there to point you towards nothing. That's all they're trying to do. And we make up all sorts of stuff about that, but in reality, we are restless creatures, and because we're so restless, we find ourselves, in a sense, making up a lot of different worlds. And this is a place where we can come and let go of all those whirls and just come and sit in the presence of oneself. You know, no more stories. You can put them, you'll pick them up. But right here, if you can just let them be and bring your attention to your body and kind of get that the body and the breath are so fundamental that you will get to a point, and hopefully you will be cognizant at that point, that the breath will arise and it will pass and it will be the last. And that's just the way it works. You know, nothing fancy. And, you know, there may be some mystery around it, but it's just that simple, you know. So just let yourself for a moment kind of feel your butt on the bench there or cushion. So allowing the mind to grind and ground itself. It wants to do something else, but this is just allowing it to rest in the center of your being, of your capacity to sit without adding anything. Whether you just feel the breath as it arises and passes, or just the body being the body. There's no right or wrong. There is just, in a sense, just getting out of your own way. Nothing to think, no place to imagine. Just resting in the fullness of here. This is it. Again, if you find yourself wandering off, then just turn the attention around. Feel into the body, into the breath. No beginning, no end. Just moments that arise and pass away. there is this open space, allowing things to arise and pass without identity, without naming, without controlling. Letting everything slip back into nothing. There is no right or wrong practice. There is just this practice of being here. The mind has nowhere to go. The heart simply knows itself. And the body is that holds all things. sitting in this great vast hall, heart open, body present. Ultimately, the seeker is silenced, resting. The heart knows itself, embraces all things without needing them to be different, just things as they are. I hope you didn't find anything. At some point, the seeker has to give up and find that there was no seeking. There was just this. And this appeared again and again and again, to be noticed, not necessarily to be used in any fashion. We are more than our thoughts. And the heart holds everything. And the body is the function, the tool that keeps us here. Over and over again, here. So we're going to take a short break here. And I don't have any idea what we're going to do, but that's the way I work, or don't work. So if you would, again, I'll just say there's a couple bathrooms down the hall here. And one of the things I'd like to do is keep it quiet. during this break. A lot of times it's like, it's a good place for blah, 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 but not today, okay? I'm good. So I thought a little bit about what should I teach tonight, and I realized I had nothing to teach. So I had to go, it was interesting, in my backpack, there's some squished up notes from I don't know where or when. But both two of them spoke to me. One of them was about the mind and how it worked, and the other was about the heart and how it includes. And then there is, of course, the fundamentals of these practices, which is really ultimately, this is a somatic practice. This is the body knowing the body and using the mind to know the body. So those are the functions, you know. So I wanted to start though with the most elusive one, the mind itself. And these were squished up notes I had. I mean, really, they were all squished up, you know. But, you know, it was great not having a phone for 10 days or anything. You know, I'm very appreciative. I realized once upon a time, you know, I mean, I lived in India and Nepal for 7 years. You know, I took robes a couple times. I did all sorts of journeys around those mountains, those Himalayas. And they were, you know, with no, you know, now there's probably cell towers up there, you know, and the rest of it. It's the way it was at the time. And how much that was the origins of my practice, you know. And I loved wearing a skirt, you know. That was really one of my, you know, it was wrapping a certain dhoti, the way you wrapped it, and that was taught to me by Bhagavan Das, who's the one who turned Ram Dass on. And he lived with me for a while, and he taught me a lot of stupid things. And but I followed suit, and I learned to love that, you know. And I remember, this is just a story before I go into this. I remember I was up I was doing a self-retreat. This was up in Manali and above, maybe at 11,000 feet or 12,000 feet, way up. And I was up there for like a week, and I stayed in this cave up there. I loved it. It was just, you know, I would sit and look out, and I would close my eyes sometimes, but most of the time I just looked out at the, you know, the wonders of the forest and the Himalayas as they appeared. And as they appeared, there was something in me that just felt like, oh, I'm part of all this, you know. And it was really a wonderful time in my life. And, you know, this last flying back and then leaving all my stuff in LAX, I had this wonderful lady who, Victoria, she I don't know, she came out of the woodwork, but she ran this Wolfgang Puck restaurant, you know, and her name was Victoria, and she saved me. She was like, "Oh, it's okay, you know, we'll find the stuff and you'll get it." So I got it today, you know. And so it had my phone and had my iPad Mini. And my sleeping mask and all sorts of little goodies that I traveled with, you know. And I noticed lots of vitamins. Oh my God. I have trouble swallowing, so now it's even more problematic. So I just I'll read these things. This is from Dangpo Tashi Namgyo. And it's clarifying the natural mind. Open, open like the sky. Pervasive like the earth. Unshakable like a mountain. Shining like a flame. Lucid like a crystal. And simple enough, yes, but it covers all the bases, Thank you, Namgyo. He definitely hit it, And there's this great line. Do you know what a musk deer is? They're this little deer, like we have these big deer, and this is a little deer, and it carries its own scent. It's the fabled musk deer searches the world over for the source of its scent, which comes from itself. The fabled musk deer searches for the world over for the source of its scent, which comes from itself. Guess what you're looking for? This is the wonders of these practices, is you already have it all. You have all the pieces that are necessary. And you think somehow, and I was a kind of a unstoppable gypsy, still am, and I would go from one place to another, thinking somehow this would be it. Of course, it was never it. It was always here. But I kept looking, and to be a perpetual seeker is very expensive, by the way. And the world is also changing all the time. And so that seeker, even though I adore the nature of the seeker, but the seeker already has everything it needs, but it doesn't believe itself, So it seeks, it searches out, where in the world is this thing called freedom, this thing called awakening, this thing called enlightenment. And yet, it's not somewhere. It is not something to, in a sense, you don't need to do that. It is right here. And, let's see if I have that. I'm not sure if I do. This was, you can see, this is definitely something that was all wadded up in the bottom of this. And I pulled it out and went, wow, that's really cool. From Ralph Waldo Emerson. The purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. It's got it all there, He had it down, So one of the wonders, this place is just, I haven't been gone. I just kind of come here and I'm amazed at, collecting all this art and then here it is, so I can enjoy it when I come. But really, it wasn't just about me enjoying it. It's about you. There are so many things here that hopefully inspire you to not look at them. They are examples of something, but it's actually to turn the mind around to see itself. You know, in a way, it's like the musketeer. You know, you're carrying it with you, but you need sometimes some inspiration, and that's what, you know, these Tibetan tankas help, and you know, this center coming together like this as a sangha, which is definitely something that carries its own validity or power, or you know, I could say its own awakening is present here in the collective, in the community. And we are the recipients of that. You know, whether we know it or not, it's still here. You know, and if we can kind of relax into it and let it inform us that we are the musketeer that carry the scent of itself. And in that is this a phenomenal truth that awakening is not out here. It is just in there. And as you will, and hopefully begin to expand that, the more you're here, the more it is not a separate world. It is a continual vision of awakening that's happening all the time, you know. So I'm so sorry, you know. I think suffering is highly overrated, you know. But I know it is also one of the greatest teachers that points us towards this truth of, oh, this is who we are. It's not something we made up. It's not something you know, need to, you don't have to go and, you know, live in the Himalayas in some cave. I know that one. I mean, it was a magical time in my life, but I understand how this works. And this works simply by the mind has to turn around on itself. It has to stop looking out for something, but actually turn around and see itself, you know. So you have all of it. All the pieces are already there. And they are there, you could say, to, you know, I like enlighten. Enlighten, what's that? Lighten up is what it's all about. Is you just have to lighten up. And that actually is the program here, is come and sit and lighten up, you know? And that's the whole ball game, you know? There's no more needed than that, except for, you know, we have these wandering thoughts and wandering feelings and emotions that gum it up, you know? They just gum it up. And that gumming it up, can get so ridiculous, you know? And so myopic. Suddenly we're not looking at how we are everything. We're looking at we are something. And that's a problem, you know? And it's why the Buddha said, oh, I'm here to teach you about letting go of suffering. And so it's that capacity to see that you are doing it to yourself. It is not someone doing it to you. And if you really understand what I'm saying, then it is perfectly okay for the world to be a mess. And by the way, it is. You know? Definitely, you know. But you also have this phenomenal possibility of freeing how you hold what's here. And hopefully you get it. And you begin to see that, freedom wasn't something that, you don't have to attain it. but you have to recognize it. And this is a big difference in a lot of these teachings, Sometimes there's, and I know I struggled to get something for so long. And finally I realized that it was, I was just like, that's a wall I'll never get through. And that what all that was so that the mind could turn around and see itself. And then once it sees itself, then it's simple. It's simply, oh, the world suffers. So my heart opens. And when my heart opens, I hold all things. And all things are not separate from me. The separateness was the illusion. The reality was that there was no separateness. And this is where it gets complicated. So if there is suffering, and you are part of that suffering, but you are also that freedom that releases that suffering. And I'm sorry about the suffering. It's just, it's like, oh my God. It gets so thick sometimes and so dark and so myopic. It's like only sees itself within it. And and we have to have that. I actually think suffering is a necessary tool for freedom. And I'm sorry about that, but that's just the way, if it was just love and light, and I know some schools stick more to that, but I see it as this process of transformation from awareness of suffering to the transformation of suffering into this awakening, this enlightened state, this place where stuff doesn't stick. It just simply, it's like, water off a duck's back or something like that. And so, but the suffering can move us to engage in a world that is possessed, as far as I'm concerned. It's totally possessed, It holds itself as the important thing. And yet this is saying, no, all of us are here because there's something bigger going on than that separate little movie that you inhabit. And part of our practice is, yes, we have to agree with that. Yes, that's true. And there is this huge heart that has the capacity to hold everybody in this room, everybody in Nevada City, everybody, down in Sacramento and on to San Francisco and on to the greater world. They need you. They need you to know that you're okay, so they're okay. And sometimes you have to put a helping hand in. But sometimes it's just enough to just sit. Sit in the center of yourself. This is a nice little piece of paper. Thousands of candles can be lit from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. That was Bubba, the Buddha, and it's really very, very simple, and I'm not saying, because I sure did a lot of practices and stuff for years, and in a few traditions. And which I'm so grateful to the teachers who befriended me and helped me walk this path, and ended up being I'm not the wisest person around, but I got some out of it. And it was really due to some of those phenomenal, I met some of the most amazing teachers of the last century, And I had the what was it, the karma, the wherewithal, just to hang out with them, And they gave me their loving presence. And it's what I hope I carry for you, because it's not something they give you, it's something you receive, And if you receive it, then you become responsible for that light. And I am responsible for that light. I know it. And do I need to do something about it? No, absolutely not. All I need to do is be present and keep my heart open and not be afraid. We are very fearful creatures, and even if we don't admit it, we are very fearful creatures. And, it's like watching the deer or something, when there's something that's not known, then apprehension or fear arise. And this is somehow here so that we can relax and not be intimidated. I'm not saying you're not going to feel the fear, but you're not going to be intimidated by it. You're going to actually allow it to move through you. And I think a lot of our, old time realizations are to block it. And this is saying, oh, no, don't block it. Just let it go through you, Oh, it's going to break your heart, I know. But that heart was made to be broken so that it could see the world that we inhabit. And I'm sorry about that. That's like, oh my God. You mean your heart's going to be broken by this world? Well, yes. And it also means that you will be healed by it. But if you hold it or reflect it or try to get around it or over it or under it, then you don't learn the lesson. And so you just are part of the problem, not part of the solution. And I'm trying to say, if you can let yourself be, in a sense, it's a funny word to say, is to be swallowed by the discomfort on some level. Because then it has a chance to transform. If you block it or run away from it or do something else, it's still there. And it only will reappear with new names, unfortunately. So I'm just babbling up here because, that's what I do. I just babble. But I know also there is something, maybe it's not, sometimes I think, John, you should be more organized. Well, the hell with that. I think just be a vessel of what it is. And that will work. I was thinking, somebody coming in, but we don't know who it is. because there's no face, no name, but it's how the world moves, you know? And you are, you are the recipients. And I am really behind you. I think you are wonderful. And I think you know that somewhere in there is this awakened being that's being cajoled out of its protectionism, out of its fear, out of its control, to face a chaotic world, yes. But in the chaos, there's a reorganization that happens. And that reorganization is self-designated. It's not something, you have to train, quote, for. It's something you have to open your heart and begin to understand the simple principles of how life works, And if you can do that, then you're going to be okay, And the world is still going to be chaotic. Sorry. But, it's like that little statement I gave of the Buddha. One candle can light 1,000 candles and not be affected by it, because that light is only there to keep generating itself without diminishing itself. In a way, it's kind of like the musketeer. It's like I'm saying the same things over and over and over. You know that, And ultimately, you learn to be a love bug, And you look at the world with, kindness and hope and compassion. And I know, one of the things is Buddhism, hope is not one of the words in the language. Because it implies that there's somewhere to go. And there's no place to go. There is just this practice of opening and meeting the world and not shying away from it, but stepping into it again and again and again. And do it with love. Why not? You got nothing to lose here. I'm sorry, you already lost it. So that's kind of I want to read this last piece here from one of my great heroes that I have been around for years. He's great. And he's living he's living in England now, Ajahn Sumedho. The practice of letting go is very effective for minds obsessed by compulsive thinking. You simplify your meditation practice down to 2 words: letting go. Rather than trying to develop this practice or then develop that and achieve this and go into that, understand this. To read the sutras, to study the Abhidharma, then learn Pali, Sanskrit, then the Madhyamika, then the Prajnaparamita, get ordained in the Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, write books, become a world-renowned authority on Buddhism. Instead of becoming the world's expert on Buddhism and being invited to great international Buddhist conferences, just let go, let go, let go. I did nothing but this for about 2 years. Every time I tried to understand or figure things out, I would say, let go, let go, let go, until the desire would fade out. So I'm making it very simple for you to save you from getting caught in incredible amounts of suffering. There's nothing more sorrowful than having to attend an international Buddhist conference. Some of you might have the desire to become the Buddha of the age. Maitreya, radiating love throughout the world. But instead, I suggest just being an earthworm, letting go of the desire to radiate love throughout the world, just being an earthworm who knows only 2 words. Let go, let go, let go. You see, ours is a lesser vehicle, the Hinayana. So we have these simple, poverty-stricken practices. The important thing is meditation practice is to be constant and resolute in the practice, determined to be enlightened. This is not to be conceited or foolish, but resolute, even when the going gets rough. Remind yourself that the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, stay with it. Let go of despair. Let go of anguish. Let go of pain, of doubt, of everything that arises and passes that we habitually cling to and identify with. Keep this letting go like a constant refrain in your mind so it just pops up on its own no matter where you are or what's going on. So that's Ajahn Sumedho. He great. I have so much love and respect for him. And he hasn't had it easy. You know, he's been a monk for 60 years probably. But being a monk is not I've been a monk 3 times and it ain't easy, you know. You think, oh, well, you know, people love you and take care of you and feed you and all that stuff and send you doctors and all that. It's not easy. So there's this truth that learning to see that we have a power that is possible, you know, and maybe that's, Sumedho says it, just let go. Okay? That's not too hard. It is hard sometimes, you know, simply because we are passionate, attached people. And we want it the way we want it. You know? Rats, you know? So, I don't even know what I'm doing here. Oh, it's about that hour for... I wanted to, you know, end with a metta. And one of my great desires is that you teach yourself how to love yourself first. One of the things in our culture, you know, was that somehow we weren't worthy of our own love. And so we were supposed to just have it for others, you know. But the truth is, you are the most precious thing that exists. So learning to love yourself, you know, for all the crap, but all the mistakes and, you know, times you've been maybe naughty or bad or, you know, something like that, you know? Yeah. You know that, you know? But learning to love yourself is the primary practice here. If you come here, this is the primary practice. Because if you learn to truly love yourself, then there is no separateness. It is all part of everything else. And once you teach yourself that, then there is no other. You are other. So just taking a moment now to just, first of all, just feel yourself, your body, your I was going to say your flippant mind, and this marvelous heart that holds this room. It holds everything that exists. It is that doesn't compromise with. It doesn't compromise with the suffering. It doesn't compromise with the desires. It doesn't compromise. It simply holds all things. May this one heart, which holds all things, be known by you and be lived through compassion and kindness and our ability not to interfere with many things, and yet hold this life and these practices as precious. May your practice of loving kindness, compassion, caring, of unity and non-separateness be the foundation for your heart, and allow the wisdom of the mind and the wisdom of the body to be the background for all of that, so that we can care for each other. May all beings everywhere be at peace. May all beings everywhere be with a compassionate heart. And may all beings everywhere be awakened for yourself and for all beings. May all beings everywhere be happy. Thank you. And I just want to say how, well, I'm going to ask you. I want you to support this center no matter what happens. And it's a jewel in the complexity of the world we live in. So please, I mean, of course, teachers are great, and we're expendable, by the way. But something like this is just like, it can hold just, I was thinking of hundreds. That's a marvelous thing in Thailand, and particularly I lived so many years in India and Nepal, 4 years in Nepal, and the Dharma was there these last, 2,000 years. And those buildings are still there, and those things are still there. The people, we're expendable. Welcome. May you live long, wonderful lives. You're very welcome. I think, is it Friday that the morning? If you have questions that I didn't answer, or I can go on and on and on. Don't.
Come at 11:30.
11:30. Okay.
You're on at 11:45.
Okay, you heard it from the source here. Thank you. Take care.